I am really, really, really happy to give continuation to this work. As Kirsten said, we have sessions 1, 2, and 3 already on the web that are covering the beginning chapters of this book. Tonight, as we will see, we'll cover chapter 10, 11, and 12. And starting with, as if we can give 2 examples, that perhaps that little rock or that step in front of your house that you always go through and you never notice, right? One day you hit the step and you ask, who put that there? But it has been there the whole time, right? So every time I come and I actually read and study these chapters, that's how it feels. Like, where have you been? It has been there, but I never noticed, right? Or sometimes we look at it through a scene or something or whatever we go, and somebody, oh, look at that. And you're like, I've been through this place a million times, but I never noticed. And it takes someone else to come and show you. And that's, again, how I feel studying these chapters and bringing these chapters so we can study. We would like to, again, share with all of you that there's a lot of text, and I am sorry for it, that I bring on with these chapters, but it's not because I'm being lazy or anything like that, because I'm really afraid that I will miss something that perhaps may help one of us, right? That if I say it on my own words, or perhaps if I try to paraphrase, we'll not get the whole thing. So we will read quite a bit, but it's for us to digest, for us to take a lot of takeaways and really learn from it. As we were saying, we have already covered chapters 1 through 9. There were 3 sessions. We're covering every month 3 chapters, and hopefully by October we will be finishing with chapter 30. So tonight we will talk about understanding, the cradle, and the family, right? We already went through the mirror of life, our will, cooperation, instruction, education, faith, work, association, and suggestion. Excuse me, let me just do something real quick. It's not clean, but we'll use the thing real quick. When just to pause a little bit, because this is important for us to go into the cradle and the family. When we hear understanding, the word understanding, what comes to mind? I'm not going to give you the microphone, but I want you to say it out loud, and I can repeat it, so we can. I was just looking for it. We're not going to use it, but thank you. What comes to mind? Understanding. What? If you hear the word understanding, it implicitly or explicitly at times tells you what? Huh? Accepting others, being something to others, right? Accepting others. Uh-huh.
You recognize something in someone else without judging them.
Okay, so you recognize something in someone else, but not judging them. Okay, right? So it's 1 plus 1, right? You hear understanding, and you're already thinking it has to do something with someone else, right? Or fixing a situation that happened with someone else, right? So I just want to have that in mind, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But we'll see a flip side of this that Emmanuel brings to us, right? So does anybody remember what we did last time we were here when we were presenting chapters work, association, suggestion? We actually talked about a parable, or not a parable. It was actually a passage of the Bible. Does anybody remember which one it was? A month ago, everybody already lost what happened. Maybe we have to play it, Daniel, the last session here before we can go on this one. No, we're not going to do that. It was actually Mary and Martha. Remember? Mary and Martha. It's funny because as we were preparing for this study, again, the suggestion, as we see here, also came that for this one, we also need to utilize 1. Since we're going to talk about understanding the cradle and family, which one do you think it would be appropriate to talk about? If we're talking about, I'll give you this example, a parable. Which one? Before we go into it. The prodigal son. So,
I was going to say the same.
Okay, Giovanni was going to say the same. So it was, This goes to show that it's not just Leo who is actually thinking about these things, picking up all these suggestions from the beyond maybe, but it's actually some of us. It is the prodigal son. It is a little bit small. I'm not going to ask anybody to read, but we will read. And what I would like to ask everyone is to pick up one or two things. It doesn't have to be the whole thing. And we're going to write on the board because this is important. Because next month, when we ask, we don't want to be, oh, I don't remember, right? I think if we write it, it sticks to us, right? And it will really help as well towards our the continuation of the talk tonight. Yes, it is the parable of the lost son or the prodigal son. It is in Luke 15 from verses 11 through 32. Excuse me. Yes. So it goes like this. Let's listen, pay attention, because this is going to be really helpful in order for us to apply what we will read tonight. Jesus continued. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had. He set off for a distant country and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his field to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother has come,' he replied, 'and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, 'Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf to him.' The father then said, 'My son,' the father said, 'you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we have to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.'" So, time to think. Real quick, I know Daniel now have to do the dancing with all of us as we're moving here and there, but just bear with me. Let us think of what are some of the amazing parts of this parable. We don't have to be detailed about it, but for us to really grasp and and put into practice what we'll learn with Emmanuel as well. It's nice for us to put some of the aspects, or what are the characters? What are the aspects? Whatever you guys want to say now. And we write it down.
The younger son demanding his part without working, yes, without
Okay,
caring for him.
so we have young son first. So demanding without working. Okay. Huh?
Before the time.
Or before time.
Because the father's not dead yet. Cannot inherit something.
Okay. So we have the young son. Who else is in the picture?
Old son.
Old son. Older son. Okay.
And the father.
Father. Okay. What else?
The foreign and country.
Ah. Foreign country, right? Okay. So if he's demanding what? And inheritance, the riches, right? Right? So there is a property. Let's call it property. Eeh. I know, it's like, oh, everywhere. So, property, right? What else?
The image of the pigs is eloquent. When these pigs, when he's working as a servant, feeding the pigs,
Mm-hmm.
which is either, I don't want to say more, but it's pigs.
The lowest
The lowest.
job for that
Good
society.
point. Good point.
For that society.
Why? Why? Let's keep asking why a little bit. Remember, who Jesus mentioned this, right? So if you think about it, pigs at that time,
Oh,
the Hebrews,
for the Jew, yeah.
they didn't even eat them. So going from a house that they didn't eat, and now he's treating pigs, which other civilizations may want to eat. They were to eat the animal, it would be something. And now we're talking about something that they're eating. The pigs, who is very like a nasty animal, he's eating what the pig eats, and he didn't even have that, right?
And that we didn't have.
Correct. So since we're talking about this, now we have what? Scarcity, right? So scarcity right there. Okay. What else? Scarcity. Oh, scarcity. I always mispronounce it. What else? Anything else?
And then his return, he gets the best of the best.
The embrace, right?
Humble. In the process,
Humble.
you have to become humble.
Okay.
And
Okay.
be, let's say, analytical in a way that he knows he doesn't even deserve to be again a son, called not son, but perhaps out of goodness his father would hire him
As a servant.
as a servant.
Good point. Good point. I know you guys are servant. I know you guys are studying this, but it's good to actually put in perspective on what we're learning here.
The older son, how to say, when he sees that, he gets jealous.
Okay.
So jealousy, and also that he was working with the father, not with good faith. He was
Okay.
foreseeing some, how to say,
We're gonna keep
some
that.
return, some.
We're gonna keep that part over here, son and servant. But I remind me if we don't cover that part. These are just for us to remember, because when we read these parables, we always tend to focus in one area, right? And in order for us to apply what we're going to be learning tonight, it's helpful for us to not only utilize this example, because sometimes people may think, and I say this for those friends on the web as well, that we're doing a Bible study. It's not that. It's for us to exemplify. And sometimes we have to be courageous enough, if not every time, that we read these things to say, I kind of look like the younger son sometimes. Sometimes we can be the father, right? That we embrace the person who have, crossed or have done something against us, right? Or sometimes we are the upset older son. It happens. It's okay. We're in this evolutionary path, but the father, older son, younger son, demanding without working before time, foreign country, property, pigs, scarcity, return, humbleness, son, servant, son is less servant, jealousy, and being angry as well.
I just have a question.
Question, okay?
As you're talking about this, what comes to my mind is he being placed because he needs to relearn?
He's being what?
He's being placed in these situations because he has to relearn.
Okay, so the question is he be placed in this situation because he has to relearn? We'll see that. Hopefully, throughout the evening tonight, we'll see that. But thank you for the question. It is a good point. Maybe that is the question for you, and maybe that is the question for many of us as well, even on the other side, because we're never alone. We're never alone. This is actually just a picture that I always like to find to kind of like really connect with. It's kind of hard to see. Luisa, so we don't pass this. I mean, it's art. Say, can you turn off the light real quick? You can see a little bit better. This is in St. Petersburg in Russia. It's a beautiful picture. It's hard to picture who is the older son here, right? But we have the father, the older son, but we have three other figures here. Some of them could be servants, and maybe one of them is because he was distant in the field, working the field, right? I was trying to look for something that we can also see a picture or a painting that depicts the face or the unhappiness of the older son. But I think this is a beautiful picture that kind of also exemplify and brings this to memory as well. But that's just something that I'd like to share. Go ahead, Elisa, if you can turn on back one. Thank you. So let's keep this message in mind. So as we work through the chapters as we did last time, we can actually go back to it and say, this is what we learned from it, right? Remember, when these teachings were brought to us, they were brought for us to truly exercise them, identify some of the areas, correct whenever needed, go back, as you're saying, learn, right, and go from there. We're going to flip a little bit now and remind everybody that when we bring these teachings as well for the book Taught in Life, it's always good for us to go back and bridge with the foundation. I did not bring anything directly from the Gospel according to Spiritism, but also in chapter 4 of the Gospel talks about reincarnation, talks about the connection with family members, right? And we'll see some of that, but I didn't bring something directly to all of us tonight. However, the social law, the sixth law that we study in the third part of the Spiritist book, talk about this idea of us in this true necessity of living with one another. It's beautiful. It talks about also, as we will see with a couple questions, the decisions that sometimes we have or we make through reincarnations to isolate ourselves. Is that okay? We have to have moments for ourselves, but not to isolate ourselves where we don't utilize our the goodness that we have inside of us, the good habits that we already have developed, right? To enrich them and to enrich other people, and to allow other people to connect with us and do the same with us, right? That is not good. So, taking two questions from this chapter, or studying the social law, we see the following. Question 767. Is absolute isolation contrary to natural law? Yes, since people instinctively seek societal living, and since all of them must cooperate in humankind's progress by mutually helping one another. So it's not right, because you are let's say, forbidding yourself from developing. You're actually taking something from your own self, right, of learning and sharing something that we have already with us. Imagine if we decide nowadays in our society to say, I'm going to go to a place where I don't talk to anybody. Okay, perhaps you will be able to live for a couple more years, not for long, but you will need something. You will need something from somebody, a product of somebody, right? So it's not correct. And this is how we further intelligence. This is how we further our hearts and we evolve. 768, in seeking societal living, do people only obey a personal sentiment, or is there a wider, providential purpose for this sentiment? Humankind must progress, but they cannot do so alone, since they do not all possess every faculty. They need contact with others. In isolation, they become animalized and etiolated. Really? I don't know. Maybe it's a typo. What is that? Yeah, we can do that later. But we definitely isolated, maybe. That's what it is. No single individual possesses the complete range of faculties. Look at this. We're not perfect yet. And if we were to be perfect, we wouldn't be isolating ourselves. Because perfection means that we have mastered these laws to a point that we know that this is intrinsically inside of us. It is through social union that individuals complete one another in order to assure their own well-being and to progress. It is because they need one another that they have been created to live in society and not in isolation. Remember, and I know we're going to discuss this a little bit more when we get into the part of family and all, but when an individual decides to say to the father, I need what is mine, and I'm going to live my life. Now, one thing would be if he were to leave the house and create a family, buy property, right? Become a farmer or something, since we're using the time at his time, and decide to do something with his life. He decided to utilize the money selfishly, right? Just for himself, and have a good time. I'm pretty sure he was a son. He had, again, as we said here, good habits, good things inside of him, but he didn't use it. Not only that, he wasted also what was given to him by his father. You see, it's kind of a double-edged sword that not only he didn't do any good, but he wasted everything that he had that he could be a good individual. That's just the beginning. That's just the beginning. So, with these two ideas in mind, the prodigal son and studying this idea that we're supposed to live in society, we can even stop right here and say, it's okay when we come to live with family members that are not thinking like we are. It's okay to have diversity. It's okay to have discussion, arguments, as long as we respect one another. As long as our aim right here is to do what? Progress. There's no way that I can progress without someone else. When sometimes we have family members or friends or whoever, it says, oh, couples, they shouldn't argue. No, they should argue. Friends, they should argue. We should argue with one another. When I say argue again, it's really to test one another. What do you think is this way? Why, Leo, why do you think black is the right color? Right? Since I have a black shirt today, I'm just, using a dumb example. But we have to do this with one another. If we don't, then it's like that step that I mentioned at the beginning, right? That I always go through it, but I don't pay attention. And then one day, suddenly, I trip over. I'm like, whoa, who put that? What happened? And you never know, right? We go into this idea of understanding. We have mentioned that understanding, it already kind of like excites us to think that when I understand, is that I have to resolve something with somebody, right? Understanding is okay, somebody did something wrong. Now I have to think, it's okay, Leo. It's all right, right? But what Emmanuel does, when I went into, let's say this, when I went into this reading, I was already, it's so amazing, is that I was already thinking, okay, he's going to say what we should do to people. It amazed me that he then brings us. The level of responsibility, the level of awareness that Emmanuel brings to us, it's amazing. That before thinking of understanding someone else, we should understand ourselves. We should change our behaviors to then create this level of understanding that will not criticize, but it will rescue and it will bring the person back up if there is a problem that can be rescued. It's amazing. So I have no words. I start thinking about it and talking about it, I get excited. He says the following: the farmer can furrow his field without a plow. A sculptor uses a chisel to bring out his creative ideas hidden within the marble. Likewise, to produce protective mental reflexes, we need understanding as a foundation for the task of our renewal, an understanding that symbolizes dynamic brotherhood, a feeling that is like a magnet in which our best attracts the best in others. Nowhere here he's talking about Leo did something wrong, this person, this nation. He's talking about us. This is what we have to do. This is our responsibility. And if I can, we'll put this aside for a moment. I just want to rescue one thing real quick. Two things, sorry. And we have a siren. Let's see. Remember that he says the following. In chapter 1, the mind stands as a mirror of life in all places. And then further down, in defining the mind as the mirror of life, we recognize that the heart, as the reflection, and the brain as the center of its undulations, generating force of thought that can move, create, transform, destroy, and rebuild in order to achieve refinement and sublimation. Because we're going to see over and over and over the protective mental reflexes, these mental reflexes. We are these generating beings of these mental reflexes. Everything that we think, everything that we receive, we're creating, exchanging these mental reflexes. Further down, he will say, when we study on chapter 2, our will, he says the following, talking about the will. Only the will is sufficiently strong to sustain the harmony of the spirit. Of course, it cannot stop mental reflections whenever these are produced by contacts with others, because attunement is an unbreakable law. But it can impose disciplinary control over the elements it governs, so as to maintain them cohesive in the service of goodness. And I remember that I actually teased Chris, saying that I cannot control what he does. Likely, you cannot control what I do. Now, there is a catch behind that. If we're together today, it's not by chance. So we have a responsibility, though. If we have A, B, or C person in our lives today, there is a responsibility. We cannot control what they're going to do, but there is a responsibility. Because if we were to think that it's just by chance, then we have to accept that the whole universe also is by chance. And we're here just as little puppets that somebody's controlling. So we can't control what other people do, the impressions that they bring to us, but we have a responsibility. In the good and the bad way. So giving continuation to what he says, all of us are immersed in our mental waves by virtue of an existing natural circuitry. We classify ourselves as good or bad according to the way we use our feelings and thoughts, which are electromagnetic forces that either protect or hurt, help or damage, vitalize or destroy. They always return bearing the elements of happiness or unhappiness that we had given them. Is it somebody else's fault that we are upset? We just saw that the will allows us to control what's inside of us. We can't control others. So if we have a will to think positively, to do the right things, and to correspond to life in a good manner, no matter what anybody else does, we will be well. And automatically, we will understand. It's not the other person that we need to pay attention, it's to ourselves. When we are angry, irritated, aggressive, or rude towards others, we instigate through reflexive action, discouragement and intemperance, cruelty and coldness towards ourselves, not others. On the other hand, whenever we are generous and understanding, being of service and useful to those around us, we create happiness, tranquility, security, cheerfulness that work in our favor. We haven't got to the point of talking about somebody else, of understanding somebody else. Yes, the understanding is a product of this, but we're talking about ourselves, right? So remember, the will. We have to connect with these other chapters because it's important for us to rescue, and if we can go back to the other chapters and watch the videos, it's okay as well. Or read the book. Now we have copies, which we'll discuss at the end of the talk. By the way, does anybody know what this is? Huh? It's an abyss. But where it is? You can go over here. It's actually in Maryland, okay? The king-queen seat here in Maryland. I'll show you what it is. I love this picture. I came across, I was like, oh, this would be something to, represent Maryland and Baltimore. And then to finalize this chapter, he says the following. All of us receive inspiration for the future from our celestial Father, and all of us suffer the repercussion of the past upon our life. Now he's changing, right? And saying if things are happening, it's meant to be, meaning there is a reason for it. But also, he comes first saying that we have the tools that we need that comes from the celestial Father, as well as the tools of the past. It's easy for us to connect with higher minds when they bring us a message in a mediumistic meeting. It's easy for us to read Missionaries of Light. And at the end of the book, I love that I probably have already mentioned the prayer that Alexandre, the mentor that helps Andrea Louise in the book, says at the end of the book, right? When you read, it's beautiful. It's easier. And thank God, it's supposed to be that way. But when we have something negative from the past, what do we tend to do? We put it aside, right? Oh, I don't want to deal with this. Oh, that's not good. Or an example of someone who left us behind and we were upset, right? To undo the handcuffs of evil we have forged against our souls, we must seek goodness, feel it, visualize it, and mold it with all the resources we can muster. We can begin by distinguishing the criminal from the crime, just as the farmer sees the difference between the worm and the soil, so that he can lessen the strength of the former and enhance the usefulness of the latter. And just as the farmer works to eliminate all blights to save his crop, so must our understanding find the means to help our neighbor who falls into crime. To make ourselves humble in order to help, without diminishing our own height, is to ensure the improvement of all and thereby enhance our progress. However, only tireless dedication to understanding can guarantee us the necessary balance in the task of our self-improvement. We must make it our most cherished dream, for only love, pure and true, can create in our minds the energy of divine light as it radiates from us into waves of constant renewal. Too much to discuss, and I know it's too much reading, but I want to read this with you because it's important for us to get these words. Going back to the second paragraph. To undo the handcuffs of evil we have forged against our souls, we must seek goodness, feel it, visualize it, and mold it with all the resources we can muster. I don't want to go into much detail on the Father and the Son, because we know that perhaps, even if we, We can only analyze as a father and son figure, a loving father, right? Receiving the son back. It's amazing. But there are fathers that they don't. Some fathers, they will be like, you know what? You left, man. You had your money, whatever. You can work for me, but you're not going to be the son. You may be a servant, but not the son. It happens too, right? So we have to acknowledge that. Is it bad? Don't know. It depends on the level of understanding of each one of us. But I want to go, we're going to talk about that later on. I'm going to go over one of the parts over here. We must seek goodness, feel it, visualize it, and mold it. Remember what the son said twice before he got up. He said, we can go back real quick because we can use, I have sinned against heaven and my Father. He says once, he gets up, he goes, and then he gets to his Father and says it again. So it was not that moment of, oh, I'm just going to sit here and God will help me. It was not just that moment that I want this, but I'm not going to do anything about it. He gets up. Imagine the pain of having to go back, facing the father, the brother, face the whole community as well. I'm back. I need a work. And he was asking to be the son. He was asking to be a servant. There is a difference here. The son and the servant. He was a son. He wanted to come back as a servant. And when he came back, asking to be a servant, the father still gave him the possibility or the continuation to be the son that he never left or ceased to be, per se, right? He continued to be his son even when he left. But he worked hard for it. He went back and did so. We can begin by distinguishing the criminal from the crime. The father saw that he has a choice. We don't know the arrangements at that time, the customs of the time, but we know that perhaps the point that you brought, did he work for this? He probably did. At that time, kids were put to work, right, very young. Some of us, we actually went through some of that as well. That work was a little bit harsher than what kids think today is the end of the world. Oh my gosh, I have to wash the dishes. Yeah, it's the end of the world. It's not, right? We did much more. Thank God for technology. Now we have dishwashers and all those things, but it's not the end of the world. But back in the day, things were hard work, especially guys, right? The men had to really put their hands on. And the father had this understanding. Look, it's okay. Here's your money. Do whatever you have to do. It's your choice. It's your free will. Here's what you have. And the other side is someone else's, your brother's, right? So the father was able to say, or to distinguish his choice, as well as when he came back to say, the act was wrong. He's coming back now. He's a different person. As you said, right? He needed that situation in order for him to change or to really relearn, if we can say that way, right? But he was able to see the difference between the wrong act and the individual. The problem is that when sometimes we are called to do the same thing and we stamp on that person the wrong act, right? Because we're upset. It really, hurts us in a way that it's hard to let go. Guess what? I'm not going to tell you. You're going to learn with Emmanuel. What's going to happen? You're going to learn with Emmanuel in the following chapters. Okay, Kirsten, you raised your hand. Okay. To make ourselves humble in order to help without diminish our own height is to ensure the improvement of all and thereby enhance our progress. We came also across something really interesting. I don't want to change because I know it's going to, but there was a discussion between Chico Xavier and Emmanuel, and Chico asked Emmanuel, what is to be humble? What is being humble, right? Or where is humbleness? And Emmanuel returns to him and say, we don't see humbleness on poverty. We don't see humbleness on someone who doesn't have food. We don't see humbleness on the mundane things that we think. Humbleness is to have the ability, and I'm paraphrasing here, have the ability to make a remark about something that is wrong, but instead we act to change the environment. Look, and he says and I'll give it to everyone because I know I have it on my computer. He says very empathetically, it's not that the person does not have anything to say about it. The person have the right and should correct, but doesn't say anything about it, but act in a way that will change the environment. And this is what Emmanuel is saying about understanding. It's not the other side. It's not the other person. It's us. How are we responding or to the mental reflexes that we are receiving? And what kind of reflexes we are also producing? Because it's a give and take, give and take, give and take, right? It's an active, and unfortunately, in our evolution, it's still reactive. But even if it's reactive, we can react in a positive way. And this is what he's saying about understanding. Moving on. I told you guys will learn with him. The cradle. If we don't correspond in a positive way this time, guess what? The cradle. Luckily, this is another beautiful painting that this is the aunt of this little baby. Berthe Morisot painted this. This is her sister looking at her baby. Okay, it's a beautiful painting. In 1872, I don't remember where it is now. I believe it's in France, if I'm not mistaken. But it's a beautiful painting to represent this chapter called The Cradle. Right there. It's us coming back. The aunt, perhaps in the past, that we didn't listen, right? Because the mother, sometimes they're sweet, or sometimes the mother do too, or vice versa. The aunt is the one that gives us the chocolate, do the things that we want to do, and the mother's kind of, right, harsh, or the father, whatever. But the truth of the matter is, it is a continuation of a previous life. Except for higher minds, when they were supposed to bring something to us, right, or help a greater group of people, when they reincarnate, they don't need to reincarnate necessarily in a group of people that lived with them before. Sometimes there are some good individuals that, they reincarnate together. But the rule of thumb for us, because at least for myself, if you guys believe that you guys are to bring something divine for society, it's okay. It's okay. Let me know, because I would like to chat with you. He says the following, that with the exception of special missions concerning spirits who come to bring reflections of the higher planes to earth, every birth that takes place now portrays the past of a spirit. So the difficult father, the older brother that didn't understand us when we made a mistake and we come back, there it is. Or the father, look at this, let's put on the positive side. Or the father who assigns himself to say, you know what, I'll let Leo come as my son. Perhaps he's going to mess up because he's so full of anger, he's so full of this, that, and that when he errs, I'll be able to open my arms and let him come in the house again. Because sometimes we only tend to look at the troubled brother, right? Or us when we do something wrong. But what about the good things that also happen in our family settings? And I like to say this here because the next chapter is also about setting, that two things. Sometimes we may not live with family members around us, right? But we have friends. Sometimes better friends that are our own family members, right? So it's important to acknowledge as family those individuals as well. A co-worker that works really well with us, it's a family member. Why not? Maybe not as, or not, thank you, Biasco. Maybe as we learn through the gospel according to Spiritism, right? It may not be the blood tie family, but it's someone else from the spiritual realm who reincarnated around the same time with us. We cross our paths, right? And we have such a good affinity with this individual, family member, okay? So it's a continuation of a previous life. The predominant mental reflex of our individuality will be impressed on the fetal plate within the uterine chamber or on our or on all of the principles of germination which provide the foundations for a new physical body. This seals our destination for the task we were summoned to fulfill fulfill in the world within a certain period of time. What is he trying to say here? That Emmanuel brings to us the following. Science have done a great job. We can actually fantasize of what kind of kids we're going to have, if it's going to be this eye, or this color, that color, or this person, that person, or it's going to happen this way. We have done wonders. And he says in the book, he acknowledges that science has done a great job. However, we're still far from understanding the problems of the mind, the problems of the spirit. Why does kid have the same traits of the father? Why sometimes the younger kids have some traits of the older brother? Sometimes they live together, they learn from one another, but it's so much alike that it's like, this gotta come from something, from somewhere. And that yet, we don't have the answers yet. But as we see here, the mind, the mental reflexes that the baby, the spirit is imprinting on those two cells getting together and multiplying and multiplying and multiplying and multiplying gets what? To be imprinted with our own thoughts. So what you have right now, sorry to say, good job. Or good to say, good job, right? Whichever way we want to take it. If I say to you, you have done a poor job, are you to accept such a thing? Because now that we know that we are responsible for this body the way we are, would you take that as a compliment or would you be upset? No. We want to say, I've done what I could, and I'm going to work with what I have. She's puzzled. What I'm trying to say is the following, okay? What I'm trying to say is the following. Sometimes we complain about our bodies. Sometimes we complain about the genes that we have inherited from our parents, right? Or this happened, that happened in my life. Guess what? We constructed this. We put this together. I wouldn't say directly, but indirectly, through our mental reflexes. This is what we're trying to say. And if anybody comes to us and say, oh, you're this way, or you're that way, or even ourselves, when we look in the mirror, we say, I don't like this, I don't like that. This is what we have. Be happy, love ourselves, and in the future, if you want something even better, we'll get something better. But it depends on us. And we should have really the compassion for these cells, the physical body, this beautiful machine. It's a product of our own mind. That's what I'm trying to say. Is it clear now? Okay. It's not determinism, but an exercise over our free will. Because he also explains and he not closes, but he going to say that we are not to think that God demands this way or it's determined to be this way and this is what we're going to have. Leo, you're going to be 6'2" or 6'3". I'm kind of like, sometimes I need the shoe to become 6'3" again. But, which a lot of people think that, oh, it's great to be tall. Well, try a next reincarnation. Try a next reincarnation because you will not fit on the airplanes of the future because right now I'm having a hard time. But it's and back problem, thank you. And you know that, and I'm not afraid to say I have my moments with my back. But the thing is, it's not determinism. It's not that it has to be this way, but it's an exercise over free will. Automatically, it's automatic response, right? If I tell myself that tomorrow is going to be a bad day, chances are tomorrow is going to be a bad day. If we come to the Spirit Center thinking that this is going to be this way or it's going to be traffic, you're going to connect with those ideas. And it's the same process. We have the free will to think, feel whatever we want, but there will be consequences. There will be consequences. This is not to make us feel bad or down, but it's the opposite. Because this is what we have been able to arrange thus far. And if we're on this evolutionary path, it's because we went through some tough moments that thus far we're here. We're together. We're not far off from one another. To give continuation, he says the following. Through the death of the body, we return to the greater life, carrying with us the sum total of our deeds that are not always what we would like to have done. In many cases, the images we carry from our journey in the flesh are simple phantoms of guilt, the offspring of our own faults, which will need to be adjusted and paid for. Meanwhile, they present to our senses a torturing hell where complaints and afflictions humble in our minds. We depart, we get out of here, we will evaluate naturally what we have done. Oh, you know what? I remember that I was supposed to talk to this person about this and this and that. Oh, I didn't do it. Doesn't that happen to us sometimes? They're like, gosh, I wish I have done that. I forgot this home when you were going to work. I forgot my keys. I forgot something. We get upset. Imagine with the big things of life that we do, right? That we feel so good about it. It's like, I was able to accomplish it. I got so much done today. Imagine with the bigger things of reincarnation, that when we go back and we sit back and relax, and it's like, wow, that was really nice to have that, to be part of a community, to do something with this person, to accomplish something during this period of time. Or the negative side that we have to acknowledge and look at it and say, I didn't do this. And then the guilt comes. I should have done, and I shouldn't have been so negative about it. I should have forgiven more. I should have understood more people, right? But I didn't do it. This past Monday, for those of us who are here, we were talking about Forgive Always by Emmanuel too, from the book Living Spring, chapter 135. He goes through this explanation of how to conduct ourselves when we are trying to forgive. In a way, to put ourselves in someone else's shoe, right? But looking at us, still, looking at us, how can we expect something from somebody when we're thinking like we think? I can expect something from Gioni when I'm trying to get a result that is the result is a product of my way of living, my way of understanding life. So if she doesn't, whose fault is it? Is it hers or mine? It's mine, because I'm expecting something with my own eyes, with my glasses, right? But she has hers. She has her understanding of life. We'll give an example, because when we discarnate and we have this thought, oh, this person didn't do this, that person didn't do that. And then we come to our senses, because after guilt, we have what? This realization that, oh man, oh gosh, I want to do this again. But it's that dragging feeling, right? Why not do it while we have the time, while we have the opportunity? Furthermore, however, heavenly justice, through its mercy, allows us a new beginning. Thus, we will come into contact again with our creditor and debtors for the settlement of debts we had contracted, which are perfectly annotated in the archives of divine laws. It's not that God is sitting there, okay, all right, this is what you're going to have to No, it's our mental reflexes. It's ourselves. It's like as we are doing, our perispirit is gathering all that information. Collectively. Individually and collectively, may I correct that. So these divine law, divine archives that we're talking about, it's inside of us, the same ways inside of us as well. And guess what? Those moments that we go back and we reflect, it's like we're taking all those papers out. Think of the photo box that you go back. It's like, oh, look at that. Oh, that was me. Yes. How many years ago? I don't remember. I don't want to talk about it. That was a long time ago. And some pictures you find that it's beautiful. Some other pictures that you're like, oh, no, let's not discuss that because that was not a good moment. Doesn't that happen? It's the same thing. It's us looking back at ourselves and analyzing these moments. To finalize this chapter, this beautiful picture, and this is what we would like to live with one another in this chapter. We are usually born on earth in accordance with our debts and our needs. to this, we assimilate the generic elements of those who blend with us in our ways. Here it goes back again. The affinity that we have with certain individuals in our lives, or sometimes the troubles that we have created in the past, that attracts ourselves to those individuals. The problems of heredity, therefore, generally stems from the mental reflections that we carry. What really happens is that sometimes people with generous heart and the will to endure sacrifice bring into their lives some suffering souls. This temporarily carrying in their arms thus temporarily carrying in their arms real challenges far below the level of progress already reached. Such exceptions, however, are the result of noble renunciations that through divine charity attract out of the nether regions old links of affections far removed in time. Let's just take a parenthesis here. What book this reminds us of? It says right there, renunciation. Right? When that beautiful, we call it way more evolved, an angel, Alcione, reincarnates on earth to help someone from the past. Right? There was a link. There was a link. Now, can spirits, as we have seen, say, I'm going to help so-and-so? Well, yeah, it's okay. But there was a link from the past. That person advanced, that spirit advanced, the other one stayed behind. And here's that beautiful spirit saying, no, I'm going to help this so-and-so. Sometimes that could happen to us. And we missed the boat, just like he did. Huh? Thank you. Andrea Luis Matos as well. So we have example, guys. We have several examples. So we have what we need to understand as far as our heredity, right? Our connections with one another. And how does this end? As a rule, however, our credo in the world is the reflection of our needs. It is the duty of everyone reincarnated to honor it with work worthy of self-restoration, improvement, or elevation. We must also bear the certainty that we were brought or attracted to it in obedience to the problems we face in our generation or the stewardship we need to be able to readjust our future destiny. Quite a bit of information for us here. Let's go back to the parable. Can we also use that as an example of the Father? Now, here's my question, and we don't have to answer. Right. Right. But remember, he didn't only have one boy. We haven't got to the older brother yet. But we can see that both of them were trouble. We'll just leave it at that. Can we see that this father, as a good father, that perhaps, you know what, I'm going to reincarnate to help these individuals? What was his responsibility with both of them? Is it just in this lifetime, if we were to consider that this is a reincarnation in the plane nowadays? Is it just, okay, meant to be? God assigned this? No, there was a link. There is some kind of connection of the past, whether he's directly responsible or not to these spirits, right? But he was the father that was assigned to do that job. I'll give another example. I'm not going to tell the book. Sex and Destiny by Chico Xavier and Andrea Luis. Okay? If you read the book, mark my words, you will not be able to drop the book. You will start and you will have to go all the way to the end, unless if you have to sleep or do something. But it depicts this entanglement, or when somebody makes a mess, messes up very hard, and I don't even have words, and then has to come back to fix the whole thing. So if you read it, it's going to be worthwhile, and it's a perfect example of this, of somebody coming back and saying, now it's time to fix this whole thing. There's a catch. There's time. There's energy, right? There is a lot that needs to happen in order to fix something Not only when we connect with one person, but several individuals, that we make a mistake. We have to wait time for these people to reincarnate. We have to find the appropriate time so we can work with the suggestions. We can work with the mental reflexes that will be coming out from those individuals and all of these things. So why not? The reason I'm saying this is, why not? Since we're in this cradle, beautiful, our aunt looking at us and saying, okay, let's do the right thing now. Now, you may ask me, Leo, what is the right thing to do? You'll be able to say it. Deep inside of us, we'll be able to say it. Is this right? Recently, we listened to, and some of us were there, when Haroldo was talking, right, in Rockville. And he said something really interesting. It's not Haroldo's. I'm not discrediting what he said, but it's actually a Kant that the philosopher brought to us, Emmanuel Kant. If we were to question something, first of all, we need to apply to ourselves. Is it good for me? Okay, it's great. Now, if everybody in the world starts doing the same thing, is it still good for me? Is it good for others? Or is this going to create chaos all over? It may be good for me, but it may not be good for the society. And when I'm saying, it's not only if we were to say Baltimore County or Baltimore City or whatever county we live in, or state, the United States, the whole world. Let's try to expand our mind. Is this in concordance with the natural laws? I'm now adding something to Emmanuel Kant's ideal of questioning things being good or being bad, that eventually will bring us happiness or not. If we apply this idea to ourselves when we are criticizing or connecting with others, then we'll have the answer. We will have the answer. Final chapter of this session. Yay, the family. or, thank you. First of all, she said, oh, that is so cute. What a chaos, right? Some people, they find chaos in chaos. They are like, I can't stand it. It's too much talking. It's too much for me to bear. Some people, they love the chaos. The grandmother, she's like, oh my God, my grandson is throwing food all over the place. He's moving, thank God. But when she was a mother, what was she doing? Boy, what are you doing? Right? So we change. Our perception change. We grow. Things are different. We see as a child, and then we start seeing as someone else. Right? So we like to take this in perspective. We see the other one helping. We see the other eating. The baby being a baby. All the things, right? The girls, and all of the things that we come. The big wants to jump. What is the family, guys? And how can we apply the suggestion that we learned, the understanding that we learn, right? Let's see what Emmanuel says. Family relationships can be considered an important basis of our mental reflexes. Such reflexes can be pleasant or unpleasant according to what the past brings back to us. We know that when we reincarnate, it's just a continuation what we have done in the past. There's no way to run from that. Some of us may be this way with that sibling, or some of us may be that way with one of the parents or whatnot, but is what we need to give continuation in our lives. We do not, of course, include here spirits from elevated levels that pioneer evolution. When brought to dwell in our commonplace environment, they quickly overcome it by creating a mental climate of their own. They then proceed with the task of renewal that they came to accomplish. It's amazing how Emmanuel puts the higher bar before, so he gives an example on how higher spirits overcome the challenges of the family setting. Because if there is a difficult father, a difficult mother, a difficult older brother or younger sibling, right? What do? What do? create a mental climate of their own, which is more positive, more elevated. They don't look with the little curls of life, the tough things of life. They just do what they're supposed to do. They have a goal, and they truly pay attention to that goal. Not that they overlook, the siblings. They don't pay attention to, because as we have Jesus as our guide and model, what did he do? He didn't go and talk in the masses with the priests of the time or anything like that. He worked with the Father. He stayed in the house with his Father for most of his life until the later years of his life, his incarnation on earth, to do what he did. But at the beginning, as a good son in the house, right, working with the Father, and he continued with his path. Instead, we refer here to the more common and ordinary situations of mankind. Everyone is temporarily adjusted to a range of ability that is within their own capability to develop. In other words, each one can only gradually reach beyond the mental reflexes set for themselves. There are two sides of this that I would like to discuss with us here tonight. One is for us to respect the limitations of others. Because, in ours too, thank you. We cannot expect someone to run 10 miles before they run 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, so on. We have to start little, and we have to break this, right? Little by little, little by little. On that note, now we use the same analogy for ourselves. Why just stick with the 1 mile when you can do 2, when you can do 3? What I'm trying to say is the following. We have limitations, but we are beings that we can adapt. With this message, with these messages, we can adapt even more. Because otherwise we can't consider evolution. You may say that, Leo, but you're pushing it. Okay, I leave it up to you to decide, but I like to push myself. And I think we ought to push one another to say, you know what, come on, let's go. We can do this. If I can do it, if so-and-so can do it, I can do it too. And so can you. I think that's a very positive point for us to bring when we're reading this, because there are people that listen to this idea of limitations and we settle. And we plant and we create roots and we don't move at all. So to think that a reincarnation nowadays, give it or take 70 years, right? Perhaps more as science is developing and we are creating more good things for ourselves. It's not distributed equally, but still, especially in this country, we have a good mortality, shouldn't say mortality rate, what would it be? The lifespan, right? Why wait 70 years? Or let's say you reach something when you're 35, right? That good time of life. Or when you're 50, when you become that grandmother that now grandfather that you're so calm with the kids and all. What about the other 20 years if you became a grandfather when you're 50? What about the 25 or the other 10 years? Can we push ourselves a little bit more to do something more? It's okay. Right? Thank you, Yasko. You are a model for all of us. That is just a key element for us to think about it. A primitive person does not suddenly leave the environment of their hurt. They are reborn there many times. This also happens to a fairly civilized person who will have to dwell a long time in the same social plane. Here they assimilate the experiences they need until their progress warrants proceeding to different achievements. It takes time, but if we put enough effort into it, if we connect with the higher messages that we saw on the previous screens, we will see that we can utilize these good things in order for us to develop faster. The spirit reincarnates in the same sphere of their family relationships and meets again the links they had woven for themselves according to the thread of their thoughts and inclinations. What is referred to a psychological heredity, therefore, is in a way, due to the natural gathering of spirits of the same inclinations and activities. He actually talks about, and I brought one beautiful example, and I went and searched it, because it's nice when we hear these things, when we read, it's like, is it true? For example, artists of all sorts, painters, musicians, and all that. We have seen several, and I came across several of them that were brothers, they were siblings, and they perhaps, yes, you know what? I'm a guitar player, if you will, right? And my brother sees me playing. Well, maybe the brother will start playing as well, and then we create a band and so on and so forth. But it's not just that. Sometimes they truly come together and they reincarnate in the same place to foster music or to create something, or just because of their minds, right? Just to develop something together. That through music they're going to connect, right? I know we have a friend here that the whole family is crazy about soccer. Right? We don't have to say it. That sometimes they had their feuds as well about soccer, about games and everything. It's natural. Through that, we can work things that perhaps we need to work. Or we can get upset. But the idea is for us to look at ourselves, look at the tools that we have, and analyze others or exercise understanding. Look at this. Pablo Picasso's father, José Ruiz Blasco, this is his painting right there, was a painter, picture right, and art professor in Spain. José gave son Pablo his first art lessons, teaching Pablo to draw an oil paint in the traditional method of realism. When at age 13, Pablo's talent surpassed his father's, José gave his son his brush and palette and vowed to never paint again. Pablo also studied at the School of Fine Arts in Barcelona, where his father taught. The Bee Gees, right? Musicians, the brothers, right? My mother-in-law, she loves the Bee Gees, so that's one that I came across as well that I can't remember, right? They're all brothers, right? And other musicians, other people around, they reincarnate together. This is to exemplify, Jackson 5, thank you, to exemplify, guys, that we are together through affinity, and sometimes the negative affinities, right? I like to keep it affinity because there's still an affinity. We're connecting with a thought. Now, we need to turn around and make that positive. Likewise, this is the tough part. And by the same principle of attunement and attraction, alcoholics, and kleptomaniacs, as well as delinquents and morally sick, are born to those with whom they have spiritual affinity. They share the mutual deficiency and painful trials. Many whose minds are unbalanced become drawn to the genetic field of those whose company attracts them. This affinity is caused either by feelings of a lower nature or by guilt, deeds for which they are indebted before the law. Moral degeneration in families, therefore, is a result of collective debts that place us within a sickly genetic environment. It is a situation we deserve in our responsibilities with life and the world. Thus, we are compelled to endure the painful return of the toxic mental reflexes we have produced. Our relatives becomes the agents of this process, and they return such toxins to us in the form of affliction and pain. You give, you receive. You take out a place, guess what? We got to put it back into place. If you don't do it now, there will be a moment. It may not be as appropriate as it is right now, but there will be a moment. This is what Emmanuel is trying to say to us. It's an exchange, and nothing is by chance. We have talked about many things, but one thing, at least to myself, it stood out through these three chapters, that the responsibility is ours, not someone else's. The mess that we're living, not only in our homes, at work, society, we're part of it. Because if we're receiving toxins not only at home, but when we turn on the news, guess what? We're thinking like it. If we see something tragic and we keep watching, if we keep feeding it, what for? We're vibrating the same way. We're thinking the same way. And it's up to us to change. If we want to see something positive, what are you going to do? You're going to post something positive, whatever social media we're using. Make someone laugh, even if it's something dumb, but make someone respectful, but make someone laugh. Don't waste your time on posting something that is not going to be helpful. Change the vibration. Sing something out loud. You know, I saw this guy driving today, and he was with his partner. It was so funny. He came this turn in front of me, and he was singing out loud in the car and everything. I was like, okay, all right. He's happy, and it's sunny outside, right? It made me laugh. He wasn't doing anything crazy. Well, in a way, for some, maybe like, hey, what is he doing? But he made me laugh. Point to him. Whoever he was or he is, you know. We have the responsibility. The same way we go back to the parable. The father had a responsibility. Now we go into the second part of, that I like to call second part, or many other parts of that parable. The second son, the younger son, had the ability to say, I want my share. I want to get out of here. I want to party. Right? He was authentic. He'd say, I want this. This is what I want to live. I don't know if it's going to be right or not, but this is what I want to live. Right? Something that I came across that had just crossed my mind, and I think it's important to say. Billionaire, not, what's his name? Not Bill Gates. Buffett, his son. Thank you for reminding me. Warren Buffett, his son. He almost went through the same thing. The father came to me and said, here's your money. You do whatever you have to do. He could become a second Warren Buffett. Did he do it? No. Became someone who is connected with music as well, because that was his passion. He could have done everything to become another millionaire, billionaire, just like his father. But he knew that he was going to be miserable. That's not what he wanted to do. And he took the money. He probably didn't become a billionaire like the father is, but he's a really, really successful person in the music business as well. It's the choices that we make that the father could also have said to him, here, do what I'm doing. I can help you and all, but the father also said, look, it's up to you. And he respected, and he's a development today. The father in the parable with the older son, right? The second son said what? I want to go and party. But what about the other son? Was he being a servant or was he being a son? Huh?
I think he was not the son.
He was not.
He wanted his share.
But he had his share, because at the beginning of the parable as well, we have a couple more minutes, but the beginning of the...
Other things.
Correct. At the beginning of the parable, if we pay attention, he was actually given his share as well, because it was actually divided equally. I don't know if everybody picked that up. It was divided equally. So the father gave it to him what he was supposed to receive, and he was still working, and he felt like a slave. He felt like a servant. He never worked with the father, not for the father as a son. His perception of the whole thing was, okay, I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do, and that's it. Right? I'm going to be the servant that I'm being asked to. No, he wasn't being asked to be much more than just the servant. A good servant, not only for his father, but the father, but also a son. So much so that when the brother comes along, back from a really tough moment, a realization of life, he's like, really? And you're doing all this for him? I didn't have a goat to party. Well, maybe you never asked. Have you also thought about this? Thank you. Yes. He probably never asked, I want to party with my friends. I want to have a good time. Can I do something with my friends? Maybe he just thought that the idea that he was supposed to serve as a servant, not as a son. And the father, with that nice tone, comes to him and say, You have been with me all the time. Where are you?
My son all the time.
Right.
My son.
My son all the time. So we got to look at these things, because sometimes it's not the problem with the father that we have to fix, but with the brother, with the cousin, with someone else. I think this whole week, and I was looking at the beautiful schedule that we have ahead of us. I don't know what I did with it. I think I lost it. The schedule for, thank you. The schedule that we have for the month of May. Not that this has anything to do with our talk tonight, but that Kirsten and Daniel will be talking about practical forgiveness, a gateway to freedom this month, right? So, guys, it's important. It's important to value what we have, to value the physical body, the tools, because it's not that we're considering an actual tool, but each one of us can serve as a good tool for us to help the sowing, right, of good crops in our lives. To finalize this, family. Therefore, in our family group, we have both the links of happiness we have been able to build through the love we expressed, and the fetters of constraint and animosity. These chains come from the disturbing vices we fashion in our destiny's memory, and which we need to undo. This being a task that involves work and self-sacrifice, as well as patience and humility. These are new resources for the production of spiritualized mental reflexes that are capable of erasing the effects of previous trouble and unfortunate conduct. Our conduct, not theirs. Because it's our responsibility. It's our chance to say, no mas. I don't want to deal with this anymore. And we can seriously think that I like to apply this to myself. I don't want to deal with this anymore. If we have a way for us to fix this now, why carry on for another reincarnation? It's not easy, because some of you know me, and I'm using this as a positive thing, not as a negative thing. Sometimes I dwell on certain things too long, right? But we have our time. And time will come that if we don't think quickly and if we don't act quickly, and I'm talking about give some months, yes, right? We have to do something. And to go back now and look at this, as we said at the beginning jokingly, and say, where were you taught in life when I need you some years ago, right? Here it is. Now we know. And utilizing the same lifespan that we had, 40 years young, I have maybe 30 more years, 35, hopefully more. Guess what? Maybe I can apply this now. Maybe I can push myself to, I'm sorry? Another 60. Thank you. Thank you. I have, the ability now, we have the ability to utilize this now. Because I know many of us have things inside of us that we're thinking about, perhaps our childhood, perhaps this, family situation that we had, since we're talking about family, or this discord, that discord, the problems of the cradle, the upsetness sometimes that we bring unconsciously from the preparation of our reincarnation. Much like Segismundo. Do you think it was easy, that reincarnation? No. Before reincarnating, he kind of got in contact with this individual that they clashed, right? This guy's going to be my father? Really? Are you kidding me? Or sometimes it's funny to say as well that nothing happens during childhood, right? Because of the forgetfulness of our past. But then things start escalating more and more and more and more. There's like this unbearable connection that you have with this individual now, and you forget that that individual is your father, is your brother. Or if it's a friend, guess what? It may be your father in the future, right? So I think this is our calling for all of us, to pick up this treasure that we have in our hands and utilize it. We don't want to be the younger son. We don't want it to be the older son. We want to be a good figure like the father, which in the parable, it was a representation of our Father, our Creator, right? Giving the resources that sometimes we think it's ours, if we go back now, that we think that we work so much for these resources that we have. Imagine if we were to be accounted or held accountable for what we breathe, what we eat, right? The love that we receive. There is no price. There is no price for it. And sometimes we want more. We want our share. It's not fair. Why do I go through this? Don't we say the same thing? And God is always embracing us. God is always helping us, allowing us to come back. Before we come back, just like the Father, it opens the arm back to us, right? When we're going through that moment, sometimes it's like, oh gosh, give me an indication. And before you even think it's there, oh, okay. There it is, right? So this is the invitation for us to really take this in our lives, connect with the parable, connect with the problems that we have, but to transform it, not to deal with the same issues or concerns that we have had thus far. We would like to thank you and open up for questions or perhaps comments that you may have about these 3 chapters or any other idea. Kirsten was supposed to ask a question, yes. She's asking.
It wasn't so much a question as it was just sort of a comment on what you were reading about. I think it was before the cradle, maybe it was the forgiveness chapter. But everything just basically seems like goes back to the parable you talked about of the prodigal son. I think it's indicative of the need for us to always reconnect, first and foremost, of course, with our Heavenly Father, but more importantly, with our physical mother and father, or our biological, I should say. And I think the prodigal son, another way you can look at it is if we do not act as the prodigal son did and come to terms with ourselves, but also go back and find connection, forgiveness, and wholeness through our loving and honoring our parents, we can never find happiness and peace in our lives, because our parents are, despite who or what they've done to us or how horrible they've been, will always be our first and primary source of life. So we must, it's imperative that we, take the lessons that we can learn from it, honor them, not by agreeing with them, but respecting and blessing the opportunities that life has brought us. So I think that this book is so rich and probably merits a whole 5 to 10 years of study. But thank you again for bringing these chapters. They're very enlightening and they're great reminders.
Thank you, Kirsten. It's a good comment. And I will stick with one word that you said. We must. Chapter, which I do not know, I have to go back, so bear with me, of the Gospel of Spiritism, entitled Honor 14. Thank you. I don't have to look. See, you made my life easier. Thank you. Honor our Father, right? What is the first opportunity that we have to honor our Father? Talking about our Creator. Father and mother home. It's not that we will agree with them, meaning that we have to do whatever they have to say or tell us to do, because most parents, they are parents, they tell us good things, right? But if later on in life, as we find that we have differences and all, and we agree with certain things, that's okay. We're all beings, we're supposed to evolve. The thing is, how respectful I am with that individual. Because if I want to exemplify honoring the Creator, and I cannot do that with those around me, how am I going to honor my father and my mother? Being a good person, a respectful individual, being a good citizen in all ways. Doesn't have to be being a good citizen that, I pay my taxes and, I don't do anything, I don't break the law. No, that's what you're supposed to do. There is a difference of doing what we're supposed to do and doing what we're supposed to do plus. We have to think about that. So thank you for that beautiful example. Alba, please.
Yeah, actually, I had question about the understanding part. I think when you said about the protective reflexes, the importance, I was listening to Alberto Almeida, and he says that sometimes we want to change, to fix our vices very quickly. But as you said, it's a marathon training. It won't happen just because I want it. So it's a process. It's one of the process was already there, that the only way is to replace those bad things by the goodness. For instance, if I'm an intolerant person, that's why I cannot understand people.
Right.
My understanding, lack of understanding is based on my intolerance. I have to develop tolerance. That's the only way to get rid of my intolerance, is to build the opposite, that is the virtue, correspondent virtue. So I think in this understanding, this reflex has to enter this willingness to replace the bad one, assuming we all have the bad tendencies. That's why we're here. But be willing to slowly, it's a slow process,
Right.
by the correspondent positive that we call virtue. And also the cradle made me think about what Susana Simões said in this last symposium. We, especially the Spiritists, we all know clearly we are immortal beings. We're spirits. But are we acting and living as an immortal being? Really thinking?
Yeah.
That's why all the problems that we have, and then we have to come back. And also, I think the other point is to value the incarnation. It's not an easy business to reincarnate. It's a privilege that was given to us. That's why we have to honor our parents, because they agree to bring us to this world. So to value, because it's so difficult to come back. Many books show that. And we waste. And the most of, especially the Spiritists, what they regret most when they go there is that they did not act according to what they knew.
Right. Yeah.
Why didn't I do better about many things that I already knew? Spiritists thought. So for the Spiritists to die to this kind is worse, to just arrive in the other side.
We go back more debilitated than we left, right, to this side. So thank you for your comments. Very well put. Alba, we finished with Alba, so we can go on.
Thank you, Leito. Wonderful chapters, and the way you summarize them, very enlightening. About the first chapter for tonight, the understanding one, when Emmanuel is telling us that, what Jasko mentioned, how we're bringing these tendencies in our thoughts, the way I'm thinking, I imprint that in my next reincarnation, and how by the way I'm thinking, I'm attracting incarnate people and discarnate people in the same level. So I was thinking, how can we do the shift, right? How can we, I don't know if Emmanuel said before or after and at some point, because there is this saying that I cannot give from an empty cup. So if I'm not a joyful person, because the tendency is like I'm not joyful and the opposite, but I wanted to be, but I cannot how do you say, pretend to be joyful, to attract joyful people in my life. It's fake. So I don't know if Emmanuel mentioned something on how to start doing this shift in our thought, or if there is something else in literature.
Okay, good question. I agree that we all don't have the capability to become a cheerful person if we don't even know how to respond to a good morning, right? It's baby steps. Exactly, start there. Say good morning to yourself and the world. Well, before we get to that point, to put a smile on our face, because then, as she said, we have to acknowledge as well that there are some people, the person is clearly faking. It happens. And I feel sad sometimes that you know that it's not true. The person has a hidden agenda. Now, who am I to judge? No one. We're here to cooperate, right there. We're here to work. We're here to understand. But what's the second chapter? The will. It's that cabinet that we have to utilize in our minds, in our hearts, right? To create these reflexes. Start small. If you cannot, and I'm using now the words of our great Dr. King, if you cannot walk, crawl. Crawl. Do little by little. Yes, it's not that tomorrow you're going to be the cheerful person of the whole world. No, but that's what you're striving to be. How it is, I don't know. Put a goal in your mind. Tomorrow I will do A, B, C, or tomorrow I will just A. I tend to do this a lot with myself. I want to do this, 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 and this, and this, and then at the end of the day, I'm like, I only did this and this, not this and this and that. And I used to get upset with myself. Now it's like, I did this. I could not do this, the second this, right? And then that, you know what, maybe over the weekend. But I know I try my best. I did not sit and did not try. That is the problem. And yes, you may need to seek help. You may need to look for examples of life and say, the other examples that I had that were negative, they serve me, they should serve me, and this is one of the things that I want to finalize as well. They should serve me as a negative example that I should not do, that I should not multiply. If I have a father that is not helpful in the house, that serves as an example that I will not do. If I have a brother that is not helpful in honoring my parents, I know that example, got to put aside. Check that, because you don't need that, right? You see how things now becomes positive? Because I could look at my older brother, my older sibling, after I come back from a situation that I went in life and not accepting me, and say, that I'm not going to do. I want to be like my father because he opened up my arms to me. I'm going back to the parable, right? Look for small examples, something that you can achieve, something that we can go after. I think, to me, that's the only way. I hope that answers it. But I'm going back to what Emmanuel says to us, that we are mental reflexes. If we are this thus far, guess what? We are a product of what we let ourselves be until now, which is not bad. I think we're doing a pretty good job because we're here talking about this tonight. But how can I get to the next level, as you're trying to say, with your example, being a cheerful person, is really inside of us. Baby steps, crawl, walk, and then run. There's nothing wrong to look at and say, perhaps I'm going to be a cheerleader in the next reincarnation, and I'm not going to fake it. I'm not going to fake it. It's going to be natural. People will look at me and be like, oh my gosh, That is the idea. That is the idea. I know Anita had another comment, and we can close it. Okay? You want to use this real quick so everybody can hear? Please.
I feel, excuse me, once you ask a question, then it becomes conscious. Once it becomes conscious, then it becomes automatic. You stop yourself and you say, oh, I had that thought. Now you can change it before you react. That's just my...
Thank you. With that, folks, I thank you so much for listening. I will now, in a good way, ask something. Please practice. Please try to be the cheerful person. Try to be that individual, tolerant, whatever we want to be, right? Utilize the examples that we have thus far, whether negative or positive examples, to bring the goodness inside of us. Be children. Think about the body and think about health. That's what we're going to be discussing during the month of May, which is going to be our 5th session. I'm really excited to share this with you.